Derek thought he had staged the perfect financial collapse to wipe me out and clear the way for his mistress. He painted a terrifying picture of owing millions to dangerous loan sharks, believing I would sign away everything to save him. But he made a fatal error. He forgot that the wife he betrayed was once a top forensic auditor. Now that my tears have dried, I am calculating the exact cost of his ruin, down to the very last penny. My name is Audrey Thorne. At 34 years old, I believed I was living the precise definition of the American dream. For 7 years, my life with Derek had been a seamless tapestry of charity galas, quiet Sunday mornings with coffee, and the deep, unshakable security that comes from being married to the CEO of Zephyr Dynamics. We were the golden couple of our social circle. I had willingly stepped back from my intense career as a senior forensic auditor to support him, to build our home into a sanctuary, and to be the soft place for him to land after his high-pressure days fighting corporate battles. I never suspected that the solid ground beneath my feet was actually a trapdoor waiting to spring open. The suffocation began exactly 2 months ago. It started with subtle shifts in the atmospheric pressure of our marriage. Derek began returning home well past midnight. His tie loosened, his eyes hollow and darting around the room as if he were tracking an invisible fly. His phone, which he used to toss carelessly on the sofa, was now always placed face down on the marble island in the kitchen. Every time it vibrated, he flinched. When I asked him what was wrong, he would force a tight smile that did not reach his eyes and tell me it was just end-of-quarter stress. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. That illusion shattered on a Tuesday night. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m. when the front door creaked open. I rushed down the stairs to find Derek collapsing onto the foyer floor, reeking of expensive bourbon and fear. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. Derek. Oh my God. Derek. What happened? I cried out, dropping to my knees beside him. He looked at me with bloodshot eyes, his hands trembling violently as he reached for my face. I can't. Audrey, I'm so sorry. I ruined everything. He confessed. Not to an affair, but to something he claimed was far worse. Through jagged breaths, he told me about a venture capital project, a secret investment he had leveraged everything on, bypassing the board of Zephyr Dynamics. He said it had imploded overnight. How much I asked, my stomach twisting into a knot. $5 million, he choked out, grabbing my hands with a desperation that felt terrifyingly real. And not to banks, Audrey. To private lenders, dangerous men. They don't send lawyers. They send enforcers. He told me everything we owned was already gone. The house, the cars, the accounts. He painted a picture of violence and destitution that chilled me to the bone. He gripped my shoulders, his fingers digging into my skin. If we stay married, they come for you too. Your savings, your inheritance from your mother. They will strip you bare. Audrey, I can't let them hurt you because of my stupidity. Panic seized my chest. My instinct was to fix, to save, just as I had always done. No, we can fix this, I insisted, tears streaming down my face. I can sell the jewelry. I have my savings. We can liquidate the vacation home before they get to it. We will fight this together. He pulled away, shaking his head violently. No, it's too late. The interest alone it's burying me every hour. Your money is a drop in the bucket. They want blood. Audrey. Then came the pitch. The solution that sounded like a knife to the heart, but was presented as a life raft. There is one way, he whispered, refusing to meet my eyes. A legal loophole. If we divorce right now, before the creditors file the liens, I can take all the debt. I assume full liability. You walk away clean. You keep your personal assets. You survive. Divorce. Derek, no. I can't leave you when you're down. It's fake. Audrey, don't you see? It's just paper. We divorce on paper to save you. Once I settle this, once I work my way out, we remarry. I promise. I swear on my life. I looked at the man I had loved for nearly a decade. I saw his tears, his trembling hands, and his abject terror. I did not see the actor. I did not see the script. I saw my husband drowning, and he was offering to cut the rope so I would not sink with him. My heart was breaking, but my logical mind, clouded by fear and love, began to see the twisted logic in his plan. "Okay," I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Tell me what I have to do." The office was a small, windowless room above a dry cleaner in a part of town Derek usually avoided like the plague. It smelled of stale coffee and damp carpet. This was my first introduction to Vance. He was not one of the sharp-suited corporate sharks Derek normally employed. Vance wore a rumpled gray suit and looked at me with eyes that seemed to be constantly calculating risks. "It is for your protection." "Mrs. Thorne," Vance said, sliding the thick document across the scarred wooden desk. "If your name remains on the deed to the Hampton estate or the Zephyr shares, the creditors can seize them immediately by transferring full ownership to Derek before the bankruptcy filing, and then legally separating. We create a firewall around you." I looked at the papers. The legalese swam before my blurry eyes. I was effectively signing away my life, the house we built. "The stock options that were meant to be our retirement. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure this is the only way I asked?" My voice barely a whisper. Derek squeezed my hand, his palm sweating against mine. "Audrey, please. If I could take the debt without taking the assets, I would. But the law is clear. If you hold the assets, you hold the debt. Sign it, baby. Let me be the shield. Let me take the hit." I picked up the pen. My hand shook so violently that the tip of the pen tapped a staccato rhythm against the paper. I told myself this was love. This was what marriage meant, standing together in the fire, even if it meant standing apart on paper. I signed my name. With each stroke of ink, I believed I was making a noble sacrifice to save our future. "It's done," Vance said, snatching the papers away a little too quickly. Outside, the gray sky matched the pit in my stomach. Derek pulled me into a crushing hug. He buried his face in my neck, and I felt his body shaking. At the time, I thought he was sobbing. Now I wonder if he was suppressing laughter. "I will fix this," he promised, pulling back to look at me with intense, desperate eyes. "I'm going to work 20 hours a day. I'll sleep in the office. I will claw my way back, and I will come for you. Just wait for me. Audrey, trust me. I trust you. I love you." I said. Moving out was a blur of cardboard boxes and silent tears. I left the sprawling master bedroom of our estate and drove my old sedan to a cramped studio apartment in a bleak suburb of Chicago. The walls were thin, and the radiator clanked all night like a dying engine. I sat on my single mattress, staring at the peeling paint, telling myself it was temporary. Just a few months. Just until Derek fought off the wolves. The first few weeks were a slow torture of silence. I texted him constantly. "Are you okay? Did you eat?" As the lawyer called his replies. When they came, were brief and cold, busy, meeting, can't talk. I tried to distract myself by returning to the workforce. I reached out to my old firm, confident that my past reputation as a forensic auditor would open doors. I was wrong. The 7-year gap in my resume was a red flag they could not overlook in a competitive market. We need someone current on the latest compliance software. "Audrey," my old boss told me over the phone, his voice dripping with pity. "The industry has changed. I'm sorry." Desperation forced me to lower my standards, then lower them again. I ended up wearing a polyester vest, standing behind a register at a discount supermarket, scanning cans of beans and frozen dinners for minimum wage. My feet ached, but my heart hurt worse. Every night, I lay awake in that cold, empty room, imagining Derek sleeping on a couch in his office, fighting for his life. Guilt ate me alive. I felt terrible that I was safe here, eating ramen, while he was out there facing the monsters alone. I had no idea that the only monster in this story was the man I was praying for. It had been exactly 2 months since the divorce was finalized. My life had shrunk to the size of a 300-square-foot studio apartment that smelled of someone else's cooking and damp drywall. I was sitting on my futon, forcing down a bowl of lukewarm oatmeal, when my phone buzzed on the crate I used as a coffee table. It was a notification from Lux Courier, a high-end delivery service app. My heart skipped a beat. Derek must have forgotten to remove my email address from the recovery settings of the account we used to share. I picked up the phone, expecting to see a cancellation notice or perhaps a legal document delivery. Instead, the screen displayed a digital receipt that made the room spin. Order delivered 4:30 p.m. Item custom platinum diamond pendant. Total charge $50,000. I stared at the number. $50,000. The man who claimed he was eating canned tuna and sleeping in his office to pay off bloodthirsty loan sharks had just dropped a fortune on jewelry. My first instinct was denial. I told myself it must be a mistake, or perhaps he had sold the house to a wealthy buyer who was using the address. But the delivery name was clearly listed Derek Thorne. I needed to see it. I needed to know the truth. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car. The drive from my rundown neighborhood back to the pristine, tree-lined streets of Hampton felt like traveling between 2 different planets. It was nearly 9 at night when I turned off my headlights and coasted to a stop 3 houses down from my former home. My chest was tight, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The house was not dark. It was not boarded up. It was not seized by the bank or surrounded by the menacing black SUVs of criminal enforcers. It was blazing with light. Every window of the mansion I had designed was glowing warm and golden. I could hear the faint, thumping bass of music and the distinct murmur of a party. I pulled my hood up and crept along the neighbor's hedge line, moving through the shadows until I reached the wrought iron fence that surrounded the backyard. What I saw through the gaps in the ivy tore the breath from my lungs. The patio was transformed into an elegant outdoor lounge. Waiters in white jackets were circulating with silver trays. And there, standing by the fire pit, was Derek. He did not look like a man crushed by debt. He looked triumphant. He was holding a crystal flute of amber liquid, laughing with his head thrown back. And he was not alone. A woman was pressed against his side. She was young, perhaps 25, with cascading dark hair and a silk dress that clung to her curves. I recognized her instantly from the business magazines. Sienna. She was the executive assistant at his rival firm. To freedom. And to us, I heard Derek say, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. Sienna laughed, a sound like tinkling glass, and touched her neck. The platinum pendant from the receipt glittered violently under the patio lights. I still can't believe you pulled it off. Baby, she cooed, tracing the line of his jaw. Did she really? Did she really just sign everything over? Derek smirked, a look of pure, unadulterated arrogance that I had never seen directed at me. Without reading a single line, she thought she was being a martyr. It was pathetic, honestly. I told her the debt was $20 million, and she looked at me like a kicked puppy. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. There were no loan sharks. There was no failed investment. There was no danger. It was a lie. A meticulously crafted, evil performance designed to strip me of my home, my shares, and my dignity so he could keep it all for himself and his new toy. He had not just broken my heart. He had stolen my life. My knees hit the soft earth, but I did not cry. The shock that had paralyzed me was rapidly dissolving, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was the feeling I used to get right before I cracked a difficult audit case. The numbers had finally aligned. I watched them kiss. A long, languid embrace paid for with my money and my sacrifice. Enjoy it. Derek, enjoy it while you can. I whispered into the darkness, my voice trembling not with sorrow, but with a new, terrifying resolve. I did not storm the gate. I did not make a scene. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my jeans, and walked silently back to my car. The Audrey who signed those papers was dead. The woman who drove away was the forensic auditor who had never lost a case. And I was going to audit Derek Thorne until he had nothing left but the suit on his back. I returned to my cramped apartment not to weep, but to work. The woman who had curled into a ball on the floor was gone, replaced by the forensic auditor who had once brought down a Fortune 500 CFO for embezzlement. I pulled my dusty external hard drive from the bottom of a moving box and plugged it into my laptop. Derek had forgotten that for the first 5 years of our marriage. I managed our entire digital life. He had changed his passwords, but he could not change the digital footprints he had left on the backups I performed religiously every Sunday night. I brewed a pot of black coffee and began the hunt. For 3 days, I did not sleep. I combed through 2 years of tax returns, credit card statements, and the shared cloud documents Derek had been too lazy to scrub. I found the first crack in his armor in a seemingly innocuous PDF of a bank statement from 6 months ago. It was a transfer of $10,000 to a consulting firm called Nebula Solutions. I cross-referenced this with his expense reports. There was no Nebula Solutions listed as a vendor for Zephyr Dynamics. I picked up the phone. I called an old contact of mine, a senior compliance officer at a major international bank who owed me a favor from a case we worked on in 2019. I did not give him my name. I used a burner phone and a voice modifier, just in case. I need you to trace a routing number for me, I said. It is off the books. 12 hours later, he called back. The money trail was not just a stream, it was a river. Derek had been siphoning our assets into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands for over half a year, and the signatory on the accounts was not Derek. It was a shell company registered to one Sienna Miller. I dug deeper into Sienna. She was not just a pretty face he met at a bar. My research revealed she was the executive assistant to the CEO of Apex Tech, Derek's fiercest competitor. This was not just adultery. It was a premeditated corporate and marital heist. They had been planning this exit strategy while I was still planning our anniversary dinner. Armed with a stack of printouts, I booked a consultation with Marcus Sterling, one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in Chicago. I laid everything out on his mahogany desk, the shell company, the timeline of transfers, the photos I had taken of the party. Sterling looked over the documents, tapping his pen against his chin. He looked up at me with a sympathetic but hard expression. "This is impressive work, Ms. Thorne, truly. But it is circumstantial. Circumstantial. He stole $500,000 of marital assets." I slammed my hand on the desk. "He moved money." Sterling corrected me calmly. "He can claim it was for legitimate business investments that failed, just like he told you. He can claim Sienna was a business partner. You signed a voluntary separation agreement stating you were fully aware of the financial situation. You waived your right to discovery. To a judge, this looks like seller's remorse." I felt the blood drain from my face. So he just gets away with it, unless... Sterling leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You can prove he lied at the moment of signing. We need a smoking gun, a recording, a text message, a witness, something where he explicitly admits the debt was fake and the poverty was a performance. We need a confession." I walked out of his office into the blinding afternoon sun. I realized that legal logic alone would not destroy Derek. He was too arrogant, too sure of his intellectual superiority. He thought I was a naive, heartbroken housewife who was currently crying in a studio apartment. That was exactly what I needed him to think. I stopped at a pharmacy and bought a cheap bottle of waterproof mascara. Then I went home and practiced in the mirror. I practiced making my shoulders slump. I practiced the quivering lip. I practiced the look of a woman who was so beaten down by life that she still looked to her abuser for salvation. If Derek wanted a tragedy, I would give him an Oscar-winning performance. I was going to play the role of the devoted, stupid ex-wife one last time. I would feed his ego until it was fat and bloated, and then, when he felt safe enough to brag, I would be waiting to catch every word. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. My thumb hovered over the record button on my secondary device. Showtime. I whispered to the empty room. I dialed Derek's number with trembling fingers, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. I had spent an hour applying makeup to create the illusion of dark circles under my eyes and choosing a sweater that hung loosely on my frame to suggest weight loss. When he answered, I pitched my voice to a perfect frequency of hysteria and exhaustion. Derek, it is me. I just needed to know if they stopped calling. Are you safe? Please tell me. Please tell me they didn't hurt you. There was a pause on the line, and I could almost hear him shifting gears from the arrogant party host I saw last night to the beleaguered martyr he pretended to be. Audrey. He sighed, his voice heavy with fabricated weariness. It is dangerous for you to call, but yes, I am safe for now. I am managing. I need to see you. I pleaded, just for 5 minutes. I have something for you. Please. He agreed to meet me at a grimy diner on the edge of the city, a place with sticky tables and coffee that tasted like battery acid. It was a far cry from the Michelin-starred restaurants we used to frequent, but it was the perfect stage for his poverty play. I arrived first, ensuring the high-fidelity voice recorder inside my open handbag was positioned correctly. When Derek walked in, I almost applauded his commitment to the role. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt with a stain on the collar and old jeans. He had even neglected to shave for a day or two. If I had not seen him 24 hours ago drinking vintage champagne in a tuxedo, I would have believed he was sleeping in his car. Audrey, he said, sliding into the booth opposite me. He looked around nervously as if checking for hitmen. You look tired. I am okay. I lied, letting a single tear escape. I am just worried about you. I work extra shifts now. It is not much. But I reached into my bag, careful not to obstruct the microphone, and pulled out an envelope. Inside was $300, my entire surplus from 2 weeks of scanning groceries. I pushed it across the table toward him. Take it, I whispered. It is $300. It might help with the interest payments. Derek looked at the envelope, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of genuine amusement in his eyes before he masked it with pity. He pushed the money back toward me, his fingers brushing mine with a condescending tenderness. No, Audrey, you keep it. You need it more than I do, but I want to help. I feel so useless while you are suffering. He sat back, a smug satisfaction settling over his features. My pathetic devotion was feeding his ego like a drug. He relaxed, his posture shifting from tense to expansive. He was no longer a man on the run. He was a benevolent king talking to a loyal peasant. You are sweet, he said, shaking his head. But listen to me. Things are improving. I have been pulling some strings. My diplomatic skills are paying off faster than I expected. Really, I widened my eyes, leaning in. But you said it was impossible. You said the debt was insurmountable. I am Derek Thorne, he said, a touch of his real arrogance bleeding through. I can handle pressure that would crush other men. I negotiated. I moved some pieces on the board. The sharks are backing off. I think I might be in the clear sooner than we thought. Gotcha. I needed to lock this in. I needed him to feel so safe that he would never suspect I was coming for him. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a single sheet of paper I had typed up at the public library. I am so glad, I said, my voice shaking with relief. I want you to have a fresh start. Derek, I don't want my bad luck or my past to drag you down when you rebuild. I wrote this. It is just a letter saying I waive any claim to any assets you acquire from today onwards. I want you to be free to grow again without looking over your shoulder. Derek took the paper. His eyes scanned the lines, and I saw the greed flare up instantly. This was his golden ticket. This was me, voluntarily severing the last financial tie, ensuring that his hidden millions would remain untouched forever. Audrey, you don't have to do this, he said, though he was already reaching for a pen. I want to, I insisted. Sign it. For us. So I know you are going to be okay. He signed. He signed with a flourish, believing he was closing the door on his past liability. He had no idea he was actually signing the prologue to his own destruction. You are a good woman, Audrey, he said, tucking the paper into his jacket pocket with a satisfied smirk. Truly, 1 in a million. I know, I said, wiping my dry eyes. I really am. Sienna was the weak link in Derek's armor. While Derek was a master of corporate camouflage, his mistress was a creature of vanity who needed constant validation from strangers on the internet. I created a fake Instagram profile using the handle Manhattan Chic, populated it with stock photos of designer handbags and sunsets in Bali, and sent her a follow request. She accepted within 11 minutes. Her feed was a digital confession booth. I scrolled back through her timeline, matching dates against my own memories of the last few months. 2 weeks ago, when Derek told me he was eating stale sandwiches in his office to save money, Sienna had posted a photo of 2 champagne flutes in first class on a flight to the Maldives with the caption "Vacation with my love." I took screenshots of everything, every geotag, every timestamp, every reflection of Derek's sunglasses in her wine glass. But social media was just the appetizer. I needed the main course. Derek had forgotten that before I was a housewife, I was the one who set up our entire home network. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, using their public Wi-Fi to mask my IP address, and logged into the family cloud server. He had changed the user password, but he had not changed the administrator backdoor key I coded in 5 years ago. I bypassed the folders labeled taxes and went straight to a hidden directory innocuously named Old Photos. Inside, there were no pictures of family vacations. There were PDF files of bank statements from a private wealth management firm in Zurich. I opened the most recent one. My eyes scanned the transaction history until they landed on a specific line item dated exactly 48 hours before I signed the divorce papers. Tiffany & Co., New York. Purchase solitaire diamond ring. Amount $120,000. I felt a cold, hard laugh bubble up in my chest. On the very day he held my hand and wept about being destitute. He had bought her an engagement ring that cost more than my parents' first house. Now I had the paper trail, but I needed a witness to tie the noose. I drove to the shabby office of Arthur Vance. I did not go as the weeping ex-wife this time. I walked in wearing a tailored black suit I had saved from my auditing days, holding a manila envelope. Inside was proof of a settlement Vance had buried 3 years ago regarding a malpractice suit he thought had disappeared. I slammed the envelope onto his desk, sending dust motes dancing in the dim light. "Mr. Vance?" I said, my voice razor sharp. "Inside that envelope is a draft of a letter to the State Bar Association regarding the Miller case. I am prepared to mail it at 5 o'clock today." Vance looked at the documents, his face draining of color until it matched his cheap gray shirt. I don't. Who are you? Really, I am the woman who is going to end your career unless you give me what I want." I leaned in, placing both hands on his desk. "I want the real schedule of assets for Derek Thorne. The one you didn't show the judge. The one that proves he committed perjury." He hesitated, sweat beading on his upper lip. "Mrs. Thorne, if I give you that, I am disbarred anyway. It is privileged. If you give it to me, I leave you out of the spotlight when I take him down." I lied smoothly. "If you don't, you go down with him as a co-conspirator. Make a choice." His resolve crumbled. With shaking hands, He unlocked a lower drawer and pulled out a thin blue file. I told him it was risky. I told him hiding the offshore accounts was a felony if caught. But he wouldn't listen. I snatched the file. Inside was the smoking gun, a signed affidavit listing $6 million in assets that Derek had sworn under oath did not exist. This was perjury. This was fraud. This was a guaranteed prison sentence wrapped in a blue folder. I walked back to my car, the file heavy in my hand. My thumb hovered over the contact for the district attorney. I could end it right now. I could have him arrested tonight. But then I saw a notification pop up on my burner phone from Sienna's Instagram. It was an invitation graphic. Join us for the launch of the Phoenix Fund and a special surprise announcement. Grand Oak Haven Hotel. Next Saturday. He was planning to launch his new company and announce his engagement to Sienna in front of the city's elite, using the money he stole from me. I lowered the phone. Arresting him tonight would be justice, but it would be too quiet. Derek loved an audience. He loved the spotlight. So, I decided I would give him the biggest show of his life. I would not just send him to prison, I would destroy him on his own stage. Enjoy your week, Derek. I whispered to the empty car. It is going to be your last. I drained my bank account to zero. There was no point in saving for a rainy day when I was about to summon a hurricane. I walked into the most exclusive boutique in the city, a place I had not dared to enter since the divorce. I selected a gown of crushed velvet in a shade of midnight blue so dark it looked like spilled ink. It was backless, severe, and utterly unforgiving. Make me look like a completely different person. I told the makeup artist I had hired for the afternoon. I want the woman who looked like a tired cashier to be erased. She looked at my reflection in the mirror, applying a coat of blood-red lipstick. You look dangerous, honey. You look like you are going to a funeral or a coronation. Both, I replied softly. Before I could focus on myself, I had to unsettle the opposition. I knew Sienna was insecure. Her social media posts screamed for validation. I took a shoebox and filled it with grainy, ambiguous photographs. I had edited shots of Derek talking close to other women at conferences, blurry images of him entering hotels. They were fake, or at least, the context was innocent. But to a jealous mistress, they would be poison. I included a typed note. He lied to his wife about money. What is he lying to you about? I mailed it anonymously to her office. By the time the gala started, her smile would be brittle. Next, I met with Julian Grant, a journalist whose byline made CEOs sweat. We met in a park, far from prying eyes. I handed him a thick folder containing copies of the offshore accounts and the perjury evidence. This is dynamite, Mrs. Thorne, Julian said, flipping through the pages, his eyes widening. I can run this Sunday morning. No, I said, putting a hand on the file. You run it Saturday night. I want the notification to hit every phone in that ballroom exactly 5 minutes after I finish speaking. You are going to speak, he asked, raising an eyebrow. I am going to give a toast, I said. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Derek. Audrey, I've been thinking. Maybe you should move to Arizona. The cost of living is lower. I can send you $2,000 to help with the move. It would be a fresh start. He wanted me gone. He wanted me 3 states away before he announced his engagement to Sienna. I typed my reply slowly. I will go. But I heard you cleared the debt. I want to see you one last time to say congratulations. Please. He called me immediately. Audrey. Look, Derek said, his voice dropping to a whisper. You can't just show up. This is a high-profile event. Important investors. I just want 5 minutes. Derek, please. I still love you, I said, injecting a pathetic tremor into my voice. Fine, he hissed. But you come in through the service entrance in the back. Do not, I repeat, do not let the photographers out front see you. You wear something simple. You say hello. You drink a glass of water. And you leave. Do you understand? I understand. I will be invisible. I promised. I hung up and stared at the phone. Invisible. I repeated to the empty room. Watch me. I spent the rest of the evening compiling the final weapon. I loaded a high-capacity USB drive with the audio recording of him admitting his diplomatic handling of the debt, the bank statements showing the transfer to Sienna's shell company, and the receipt for the engagement ring. I synced it to a presentation software that would autoplay once plugged into any standard AV system. Finally, I sat down at my wobbly kitchen table and wrote a letter to the board of directors of Zephyr Dynamics. I detailed every dollar Derek had embezzled to fund his lifestyle and his mistress, attaching the routing numbers my contact had provided. The apartment was quiet. I poured a glass of cheap wine, the kind that came in a box, and sat by the window. Outside, the city lights flickered. Tomorrow, I would walk into the lion's den. I expected to feel fear. I expected to feel hesitation. But as I took a sip of the sour wine, I realized my hands were perfectly steady. Here is to you, Derek, I whispered, raising the glass to the reflection of the woman in the window who was finally ready to strike. Cheers. The Grand Oak Haven Hotel was a palace of gold leaf and crystal, pulsating with the energy of the city's financial elite. I could hear the hum of conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes before I even pushed past the heavy oak doors. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume and unbridled ambition. I stood at the threshold of the ballroom, scanning the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns until my eyes landed on the stage. Derek stood there, radiating the false confidence of a man who believes he has gotten away with murder. He was holding a microphone, his other hand firmly clasped around Sienna's waist. She looked radiant in a silver dress that cost more than the settlement I was supposed to receive. "We have weathered the storm," Derek announced, his voice booming through the speakers. The rumors of Zephyr Dynamics' demise were greatly exaggerated. Tonight, with the launch of the Phoenix Fund, and with my partner Sienna by my side, we are rising from the ashes stronger than ever. Applause thundered through the room. It was the perfect moment. I did not go to the service entrance as I had promised. I walked straight through the main double doors, flanked by two confused ushers who were too intimidated by my midnight blue velvet gown and the sheer force of my glare to stop me. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide aisle down the center of the room. The silence spread outward from my position like a shockwave. Derek's eyes found me. The charming smile slid off his face like wet paint, replaced by a look of absolute, primal terror. He froze, the microphone dipping in his hand. "Security," he mouthed to the head of his detail, tapping his chest frantically. "Get her. Get her out of here." But he was too slow. I moved with a purpose that defied the high heels I was wearing. By the time the security guards registered his command, I was already ascending the stairs to the stage. I walked right past a stunned Sienna, who shrank back as if I were a ghost, and took the spare microphone from a stand. "Audrey, don't!" Derek hissed, his voice trembling so much the mic picked it up. "I'll give you anything. Just don't." I ignored him and turned to the crowd. My voice was steady, calm, and lethal. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive the interruption," I said, my smile tight and cold. "I am Audrey Thorne. You might know me as the woman Derek divorced 2 months ago to protect him from a catastrophic $20 million debt. I just wanted to add my congratulations to this miraculous recovery." The room was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the buckets. "It truly is a miracle," I continued, locking eyes with Derek. "To go from facing loan sharks and bankruptcy to launching a multi-million-dollar fund in just 8 weeks, it makes one wonder how the math works." Derek lunged at me. "Cut the mic. Cut the feed." I took a step back and pressed the button on the small remote I had concealed in my palm. The massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying the company logo, flickered and changed. The room gasped in unison. Projected on the screen 20 feet high was a bank statement. It clearly showed a transfer of $5 million to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. But the audio was the nail in the coffin. My recording from the diner blasted through the surround sound system. I told her the debt was $20 million, and she looked at me like a kicked puppy. It was pathetic, honestly. Derek's voice, arrogant and mocking, echoed off the walls. He stopped dead in his tracks, his face draining of all color until he looked like a corpse. The screen shifted again. It showed the receipt for Sienna's engagement ring, dated the day of our divorce filing. Then came the text messages between Derek and Sienna planning the asset hideout. I turned to Sienna. She was trembling violently, her eyes darting around the room as she realized the social exile that was descending upon her. "You didn't know. Did you?" I asked her, my voice amplified for everyone to hear. "Or maybe you did. The FBI will decide that." "What? What are you talking about?" Derek choked out, looking at the stunned investors who were now pulling out their phones to record the disaster. "I didn't just come to crash your party." "Derek," I said, leaning in close so he could see the fire in my eyes. "At 8 o'clock this morning, I delivered a full forensic audit of your offshore accounts to the IRS and the FBI. They have the routing numbers. They have the dates. They have the proof of money laundering and tax evasion. No, you couldn't." He stammered, backing away until he bumped into the podium. "I could," I replied, "and I did. Enjoy the party. Derek." The guests of honor should be arriving any minute. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom did not just open, they were thrown wide with a force that rattled the hinges. A dozen figures in navy blue windbreakers emblazoned with bold yellow letters reading FBI and IRS swept into the room like a dark, inevitable tide. The shock that had paralyzed the room moments ago shattered into absolute pandemonium. Derek was sweating profusely, his hands gripping the podium until his knuckles turned white. He screamed into the microphone, his voice cracking and pitching high with desperation. This is a setup. That recording is fake. It is AI generated. Do not listen to her. She is unstable. She is trying to ruin me because I left her, but the investors were not listening to his lies anymore." A man in the front row, a venture capitalist who had poured millions into Derek's previous projects, stood up and shouted, his face purple with rage. "Where is our money?" Thorne: "You said the funds were secure. I want my capital back immediately." Another woman screamed from the back. "Liar! You are a fraud, Sienna." Realizing her golden ticket was about to be indicted made her move with terrifying speed. She saw the agents ascending the stairs and calculated her odds in a split second. She turned on Derek with the ferocity of a trapped animal. She swung her hand and slapped him across the face, the sound echoing sharply through the microphone he was still clutching. "You bastard!" she shrieked, playing to the cameras with a performance that almost rivaled my own. "You told me you were divorced. You told me that money was yours. I didn't know. I didn't know you stole it. You used me." It was a lie. Of course. I had the emails in my pocket to prove she had helped him set up the shell companies and chosen the names for the offshore accounts. But seeing her throw him to the wolves gave me a dark, cold satisfaction. Derek looked at her, his cheek turning bright red, utter betrayal and confusion swimming in his eyes. He was completely alone. I walked up to him one last time. The police were swarming the stage, shouting commands, but they seemed to pause for a heartbeat as I closed the distance. I stood toe-to-toe with the man who had been my husband for 7 years, the man I would have died for just 2 months ago. "Audrey, please," he whimpered, tears streaming down his face mixed with sweat and snot. Tell them we can work this out. I can pay you back. I have money. I have so much money." I leaned in close, so close I could smell the expensive cologne masking the scent of his fear. I lowered my voice to a whisper that was just for him. I signed the divorce papers because I thought you needed my sacrifice, I said softly, looking deep into his terrified eyes. Now I signed the arrest warrant because you deserve it. An agent grabbed Derek's shoulder and spun him around, slamming him against the podium. Derek Thorne, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and perjury. You have the right to remain silent. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Flashbulbs erupted like a strobe light storm. Every phone in the room was raised, live streaming the downfall of the golden boy to the world. He was dragged kicking and screaming off the stage, his tuxedo rumpled, his dignity shredded, pleading with anyone who would listen. It wasn't me. It was her Sienna. Tell them, he screamed, but Sienna was already being cornered by 2 other agents who were reading her rights. I did not look back at him. I turned and walked down the stairs, moving through the parting crowd like a queen through her court. I kept my head high, my shoulders back, and my expression serene. Behind me, the chaos roared, the shouting of the investors, the wailing of Derek, the barking orders of the police, but I felt nothing but a profound, quiet peace. As I stepped out of the hotel into the cool night air, my phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a notification from Julian Grant. The headline flashed across my screen, "The Thorne Deception." How one CEO faked ruin to rob his wife and investors. The story was out. The evidence was public. Derek was finished, and for the first time in months, the air tasted sweet. 3 months later, the gavel slammed down with a sound that felt more like a liberation bell than a judicial ruling. The trial of Derek Thorne was swift, brutal, and entirely one-sided. With the mountain of evidence, I had provided the audio recordings, the offshore bank statements, and the internal emails detailing his conspiracy. His high-priced defense team crumbled like wet paper. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for financial abuse, declared the previous divorce agreement completely void due to fraud and duress. She looked over her spectacles at Derek, who was slumped in his chair wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his pale, defeated skin. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "You attempted to weaponize the legal system to defraud your wife? The court does not look kindly on such manipulation. The division of assets was recalculated immediately. The judge awarded me 70% of our total marital estate, including the hidden funds in the Cayman Islands that the federal government had successfully frozen. In addition, Derek was ordered to pay restitution for emotional distress and legal fees. When the sentence was read, the air left the room. Derek was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud, perjury, and tax evasion. 10 years. But my life, my career. Derek sobbed, his head in his hands. Sienna fared little better, though she avoided a prison cell by turning state's witness against Derek at the 11th hour. Her immunity deal kept her free, but her social currency was bankrupt. She was fired from her job, blacklisted from every major corporation in the city, and the social elite she had so desperately tried to impress now treated her like a pariah. I heard she had to move back to her hometown in Ohio, disgraced and penniless. I wasted no time in severing the final tie to my past. I put the Hampton mansion on the market immediately. It was a beautiful house, but the walls whispered of lies and late-night betrayals. I sold it for $2.5 million and used the proceeds to fund my new dream. I leased a sleek, modern office space on the 35th floor of a downtown skyscraper. The sign on the frosted glass door read, "Thorne Financial Advocacy." I had decided to open a specialized consulting firm dedicated to helping women who were being financially abused or defrauded in their marriages. I hired a team of forensic accountants and private investigators. My calendar was booked solid for 6 months within the first week of opening. One afternoon, as I was leaving the courthouse after filing paperwork for a client, I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench, clutching a cardboard box of personal effects. It was Arthur Vance. He looked up as I approached, his eyes widening in recognition. He looked smaller, older. My complaint to the Bar Association had been devastatingly effective. He had been disbarred for ethics violations and collusion in fraud. Mrs. Thorne, he muttered, looking down at his shoes. It is Ms. Thorne, I corrected him gently. And Arthur? I hope you saved your money. Retirement can be expensive. I walked away without waiting for a response, the click of my heels on the pavement sounding like a victory march. I returned to my office as the sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of violet and gold. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city that was now my oyster. I was no longer the weeping wife begging for scraps of truth. I was a CEO, a protector, and a woman who had walked through the fire and came out made of steel. My assistant knocked softly on the door. Ms. Thorne. The contract for the new merger consultation is ready for your signature. Thank you, I said, turning back to my mahogany desk. I picked up my pen. It was heavy, substantial. I looked at the paper, thinking of the trembling hand that had signed that fraudulent divorce decree in a dusty office months ago. That hand was gone. I signed my name with a flourish, the ink dark and permanent. Audrey Thorne. The story was over, and my life had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Derek's karma. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Mia Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people.